Since we're on the topic of Paul, real quick, was he indeed a disciple of Gamaliel? I mean, I think it says this question is a little out of order, but since it's on topic, I'll just kind of throw it out there. It said, was Saul of Tarsus really was a student of Rabbi Gamaliel? How likely was it the Roman citizens hired? This is a conspiracy theory that I saw that they've had videos on that actually kind of makes a little bit of sense. But she's kind of curious if this is Deborah Lee from Facebook. Kind of curious, what kind of jurisdiction did the high priest have over Damascus? That whole package there has got so many plausible answers.
All right, so this is a very, very good question.
And sorry, I will get to the rest of the questions, but it was on topic, and I figured it'd be best to hit it now. So I'll get to we have got
but this is big. This is not something that big glossed over at all. It should be said, first of all, that Christians or former Christians, it's not their fault, but they have all this information about Paul, either from Acts, or they're getting it from other epistles, or then certainly getting it from Paul. But what people who come from the church tend to do is they kind of conflate it all. Like somehow Paul claimed to be a student of Gamaliel. He actually never would make that claim for himself. If he did, he would be laughed out of court in a second. The letters of Paul are written during the 50s. The book of Acts is written, like, let's say at about 90, 85, 90 is very, very late. By the time we get to 90, you can write anything you want. Paul was a disciple of Rabbi Gamaliel. By the way, I'm a descendant of Rabbi Gamaliel. I am not father, but my great-grandmother was a descendant of Rabbi Gamaliel, who was from the house of David. I am. Okay, Paul was not a descendant of Rabbi Gamaliel. He wasn't a member of the Sanhedrin. This is all nonsense, and it's very transparent that this could not be the case. Now, I'll explain to you why he couldn't. I mean, he will claim, I'm a Pharisee of Pharisees. I'm the biggest Pharisee. I know there were Pharisees, but not like me. I'm such a Pharisee. You never heard of such a... So he could not be a disciple of Gamaliel for 1,000 reasons. Let me go through why this is all patent nonsense. To begin with, we are told that Paul went to Damascus at the behest of the high priest to persecute Christians in Damascus. Along the way, the claim is made that Paul had these encounters, these supernatural encounters with Jesus, and he converts to Christianity. We're just going to use the word converts to Christianity because it's, I don't want anyone writing he didn't convert, he was doing it. Stop. Okay, we're going to use words that are just easy to work with. So the point is, hold the show. Who were the high priests in the time of Paul? Who controlled the priesthood? As it turns out, they were Sadducees. Sadducees were an elite group that were in cahoots with Rome that very much controlled the priesthood. They were enemies of the Pharisees. They were at war, spiritual war with the Pharisees, and therefore, just think about this for a moment. If Paul was a Pharisee of Pharisees, if that's the school he came from, which he does claim for himself, if he was what Acts says, that he was a student of Gamaliel, what is he doing working for a Sadducee? I mean, that's totally ridiculous. Number two, do you understand? I mean, that's like saying that the chief rabbi is working for the Messianic movement. I mean, that's like ridiculous. I mean, that could not happen. Number two is the high priest would have no jurisdiction over what's going on in Syria. I mean, that's just patently ridiculous. Third thing is that the attitude of the Pharisees were not in any way threatened by Christians. That means they didn't want to kill Christians or harm them or persecute them. And in fact, this is even revealed in the Christian Bible. Think for a moment. If we go to Acts chapter 5, what do we encounter there? Peter is brought in front of Gamaliel, who we are told was the teacher of Paul. What is Gamaliel's attitude? I mean, if we are to believe that Paul was a disciple of Gamaliel and follow the teachings of Gamaliel, let's just that that could not be, because he would be a Tana, he would listen to Mishnah. He wasn't. That never happened. But let's just play make believe and let's go along with the story. What was the attitude of the Pharisees? The attitude of the Pharisees was very simple. Gamaliel says in the book of Acts, he says, "Look, don't harm Peter. Don't do anything to him." Why? Because remember, Peter in this early point is sort of teaching a Christianity, is a follower of Jesus, but he's still keeping kosher, keeping everything Jewish. So Gamaliel, we are told, tells him that, hey, tells those who brought Peter to Gamaliel, don't hurt him. Don't even try to stop him. Don't do anything to impede him. Don't persecute him. Leave him alone. God will take care of it. You know why? Because if what Peter is teaching is of God, hurting Peter is going to accomplish nothing. And if it's not of God, it will in fact recede. It will simply dissipate. It will evaporate. That was the attitude of the Pharisees. The attitude of the Pharisees was, you don't need to persecute Christians. Just teach them. Just like, all of Pharisaic Judaism, which is Orthodox Judaism, don't go and persecute people because they don't keep Shabbos. They don't know any better. Did they come under influences of liberal Jewish groups or whatever it is? Love them, not beat them over the head. So therefore, think about this for a moment. If in fact Paul came from the Weltanschauung, from the worldview of Rabbi Gamaliel, what was he doing going to Damascus to persecute Christians? The attitude of Rabbi Gamaliel is don't persecute Christians. Now, as it turns out, Rabbi Gamaliel's statement, was in fact prophetic in a strange way, because what happened was that Peter's understanding of Christianity, again, this is before we're getting to Acts chapter 10, before Acts 15, was that you could be Jewish, you can keep the Torah, you can keep the mitzvahs, but you can believe in Jesus, that they can all go together. And Rabbi Gamaliel says that can't happen, that can never be, because the Bible tells us, and this is not an Acts, that not all Jews remain a part of the Jewish people. Only those Jews who are faithful to God's teaching as truth. You find this in Deuteronomy chapter 7, verse 9, verse 12. The point is that only the truly faithful servant of God is preserved. Let's be frank. Many Jews, thousands, converted to Christianity, got baptized. Where are the children of these Jews today? They're lost. They've assimilated. If Jesus was the Messiah, if Jesus is everything that your church says he was, then why did God preserve only those Jews who said that Jesus is not the Messiah, that rejected the claims of the church, that rejected why did God, if there's no oral Torah, why didn't God preserve the Sadducees? They're gone. They've disappeared. So what Gamaliel is saying is, you don't have to work. You don't have to do. This is God's department. He'll take care of this. And in fact, that understanding of Christianity, which has they're gone, in fact, disappeared. You will, of course, encounter Jews today who believe in Jesus, but they're not the descendants of those Jewish Christians, whatever name you want to call them, from the time of things. So therefore, all this is absolute nonsense. He wouldn't be a member of the Sanhedrin. He wouldn't be persecuting. Why would he be persecuting Christians in Damascus? Gamaliel and this type of outlook is, don't persecute them. If it's not of God, it will fall away of its own, which in fact happened. Besides the fact, what is he doing from Tarsus? And if you read Paul's letters in Greek, let's just say this, it's very simple. Paul was a highly literate Greek-speaking Christian. Okay, Jews from Jerusalem, Jews who were members of the Sanhedrin, Greek wasn't just another language. Greek was like German. Greek was the language of the Hellenists. It was the language of all those who were enemies of God. Just so you understand, those of you who are English speakers, it's not a simple matter to write because you're literate in English. I'm speaking to you Americans. So you're literate in English. You say, I speak English. But I'll ask you honestly, would you be able to write a highly literate rhetorical book of 16, of 10 chapters, of 13 chapters in English, well written? The answer is probably not. It'll be very difficult. You have to be highly literate to be able to write that way. So that's not where Paul comes from. In fact, it's interesting that Jerome, a very important church father, much later the primary translator of the Vulgate, also casts doubt on Paul's origins from Tarsus. Tarsus is one of the two places that was the center for Greek philosophy and thought. That's like Berkeley. I mean, that's not where, religious Jews were from. So therefore, Paul wasn't a Pharisee. That's why he emphasizes it. Why is he emphasizing it? Because he's pushing back at the accusation that, he was some sort of a Pharisee. So he wouldn't be working for the high priest. A Pharisee is not working for Sadducees. That ain't happening anywhere, okay? That's like saying a Lubavitcher is working for a Karaite, or a religious Jew is working for I don't know what, for the Messianic. That's just not happening. Two is the attitude of the Pharisees was, why persecute anyone? One could make the case that maybe Sadducees might feel very threatened by the Christian movement because they were in cahoots with Rome, so therefore they would find it to be very threatening because their position of power came from Rome, and any kind of movement that said that Rome's kingdom was coming down, they would have felt threatened, not Pharisees. So therefore, the notion that Paul was a Pharisee is abject nonsense. The idea that Paul went to Damascus to persecute Christians, why would a Pharisee be interested in doing that? I mean, I'm a Pharisee. I don't persecute Christians. I just say, let me teach you Torah. Come, listen, let's study Scripture together. Come, let's reason together. That's why this is all complete nonsense. I mean, also, Paul's exegesis, if he was really knowledgeable, he was really an evil charlatan. I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt, but if he really was what he says he was, which is impossible, then he really was a psycho, because that means he knows. He's like a Holocaust denier, and he knows. So I'm just going to give him the benefit of the doubt that he was an object ignoramus. As far as Jerome was concerned, Jerome suspected that Paul was not from Tarsus, but rather from Galilee, but that goes on to a different area. So that's not nonsense.
Was there a possibility that a Roman citizen could have hired the Sanhedrin?
Yeah, again, Paul to be a Roman citizen is extremely unlikely. In order to be a Roman citizen, you would have to be worshiping the gods of Rome. Again, extremely unlikely. Again, I'm not going to say, but these are very unlikely claims made for Paul. But I don't want to engage in this part, because I don't want to cross into the speculative part. I just want to look at the text. Paul isn't working for there is this denomination, you wouldn't believe it, called humanistic Judaism. They don't even believe in God. The Reform movement said that you can't even belong to the Reform movement because they don't even have a Torah scroll in their synagogues, okay? So, to claim Paul is a Pharisee is working on behalf of the Karaites. This is just absolutely preposterous.
I agree there, and I may have not have asked the second part of the question right. In fact, I know I didn't. I think I got them backwards. How likely was it that a Roman citizen hired by the Sanhedrin to be their policeman? In other words, how likely was it? Was it a possibility even that that Paul was actually hired by the Sanhedrin to do whatever he wanted, whether it be lead those Christians away to kind of as a decoy or
no, that didn't happen.
Okay.
You read Paul. Paul is, when I say sincere, he was very committed to destroying everything, any vestige of traditional Judaism. What was his motives is not really relevant to the Jews. We don't get into this too much. You'd have to speculate. But Paul was a person who he was deeply influenced by Hellenistic thinking. I can't get into the scope of this becomes too large, and he is taking many of the ideas that Philo had expressed. Philo was a contemporary of Jesus. He was a Jew from North Africa, from Alexandria, had visited the land of Israel a number of times, and that's what Paul's influence is. And again, this kind of Greek influence, Tarsus is the city you would live in if you wanted to study. If this is if this is what you wanted to study. So this is, very unlikely, but I'm going to try to just stick with what the text says. No Pharisee is going to Damascus. He's not working for anybody, for any high priest. He's not working for any Sadducee. High priests had no jurisdiction whatsoever what went on in Syria. They're not. What is he going to pursue? How ridiculous is that? So therefore, that just never happened. These are stories that developed and were created, and we're going to find in the book of Acts. Now, why are we presented that Paul was an enemy of Christianity, and then he became a believer? Well, that we understand why Paul is going to spend so much time on, and that is that it was to lend credibility to him. There's a professor from MIT, a very brilliant man. His name is Noam Chomsky. Noam Chomsky is one of the greatest enemies of the state of Israel today. He's an enemy of, what am I going to say? If you don't know this now, Noam Chomsky, how he begins his speeches? He talks about growing up in Philadelphia and giving money to the Zionism and putting money in the Pushka, which is the charity box. And when Norman Finkelstein, another one of our great friends, a Jew by birth, only by birth, what does he do? He starts by saying, "No, I used to be the other way, and my parents are Holocaust survivors," and so on and so forth. There's a professor, I don't know if he's still there, from Northwestern University. His name is Arthur Butts. He's a Holocaust denier, Arthur R. Butts. He's a professor of computer engineering at Northwestern. I think he retired. I'm not certain of that. All these Holocaust deniers, David Irving, when these guys get up, the way their speeches, they all start the exact same way. When I was a kid, I used to believe, that there was 6 million Jews that were murdered. Go on YouTube and watch any of their presentations of the deniers. They always start by saying, "Oh no, I used to be on the other side. I used to believe that 6 million Jews were systematically murdered in Europe during World War II. I believe that." There was a Jew named David Cole who actually was a Holocaust denier. That was the speech he gave. So therefore, it sounds more credible to say, "Hey, I used to be on the other side, but guess what? I found out the truth." So therefore, that kind of rhetoric is always been a part of those of the enemies of Jews. I used to be on the other side, but then I discovered the truth. There was no systematic extermination of the Jewish people. And David Irving, actually, at the University of Colorado, had the chutzpah and audacity to say in his presentation, going back a number of years ago, to say that you Jews should thank me for saying that the Holocaust, the genocide, never occurred in Semitic, because you thought you lost 6 million Jews. Now you should know that you really didn't, and everybody's doing fine. I mean, the audacity and the chutzpah of these people is unbelievable, but they all start off the same way. You'll find many Messianic leaders talking about exaggerating, you know, so that's what they do. Oh, you hear all these Messianics. I grew up, I was an Orthodox Jew. So to them, the Orthodox Jew means that you ate gefilte fish one time. Well, why is it? There were guys, you wouldn't believe this, there were guys who actually claimed in their books that they were ordained rabbis, and then they made it up. There was one guy, oh, his name escapes me. Oh, what happened was he claimed to have been a rabbi and then discovered Jesus, and then he made the mistake of getting divorced, and his wife wrote a book and put a picture of his so-called rabbinic ordination up, and it was actually completely fictitious. Michael, why have you forsaken me? Something, I forget the name of it. It was called years ago. He claimed to have been an Orthodox rabbi and he found Jesus. Well, all these stories are nonsense, but this is very much this is the way Paul dealt. I was there. I was an Orthodox Jew. I'm not going to continue naming a million names, but this is all over. You'll hear these so-called Messianic rabbis. I used to be an Orthodox Jew. I used to be a rabbi, and then I found Jesus.
This is a very sad thing that is going on. And just for the viewers out there who think that that a claim is just being made, and you know, just so you don't think that we're expecting you to believe everything that we're saying, or just a story Rabbi heard, or maybe something he experienced himself. Well, I too have experienced the same scenario, Rabbi, where I thought about this for months and months, whether I should ever even mention this. But you know what? This isn't Lashon Hara. This is not speaking evil about somebody. It's bringing the light, the truth out there, and exposing something that is a lie. My dad is a Messianic leader in Austin, probably one of the only ones out here. And I was shocked because when I went to the website to actually see his bio talks something about how he was persecuted as being a Jew as a young boy and all this other stuff. And I'm like, we're not even Jewish. We don't have any Jewish ancestors. And he didn't even turn to Judaism until like 22 years ago. So it's like he's even on his website, he's got a fake past so that when Jewish people will actually see his website, he's Jewish and he found this Jesus too. Maybe there's more to this Jesus character. So by experience, and Dad, I love you if you ever see this, but you know, this is, we don't deceive people to pull things off. But what I've seen is just exactly like Rabbi Singer has said.
So it was Michael Esses, that was his name. And he said he was an Orthodox rabbi, ordained from this, I think it was like the Sephardic Institute of Rabbinic, just some made-up name over there. And as I said, he made the mistake of getting divorced. And when he got divorced, his wife exposed him that he was a complete fraud with the picture of his fake divinity and so on. This went on. The name of the book, by the way, if you want to read about this, is called Survivor of a Tarnished Ministry. It was written by his ex-wife. His name was Betty Blass, and she exposed the whole thing. This goes on went on all the time. I was Orthodox. We find out maybe a guy grew up in Kansas City and his family belonged to they were members of, but these were not, it doesn't mean that it never was. There was a Jew who was Orthodox that worshipped idolatry. The Bible is full of such people. But the Messianic movement has failed in this area because simply it makes claims that for the Orthodox Jew become impossible, in that it's saying that if you look at the Jewish Bible, I can prove to you that Jesus is the Messiah. Well, once you do that, see, like the Quran doesn't do that. The Quran says they believe in Jesus as a prophet, born of a virgin, but they don't point to Isaiah. But the moment you claim that Isaiah 7:14 is speaking about the Messiah born of a virgin, so then I mean, you can't buy into that. I mean, this is not possible. So, I mean, just read the book. I'm sure it's on Amazon. It's called Survivor of a Tarnished Ministry. And that's one guy. I mean, there's tons of these guys who just went around saying, oh, yeah, I'm an Orthodox rabbi, and so on and so forth. It was very common. But anyways, these people took their cues from Paul. This is what Paul did. No Pharisee was interested in going to Damascus and working for the Sadducees to persecute Christians. When Gamaliel, we are told, I mean, it's so convoluted, we're told Gamaliel, his attitude is, don't persecute Jews who believed in Jesus. So what is Paul doing running to Damascus? The idea was to lend credibility. Oh, I was on the other side too. My parents are Holocaust survivors. You can't call me an anti-Semite. Anyways, just read it. Survivor of a Tarnished Ministry. I mean, that's just an example of it. That's Paul. Where did these guys get this idea from? This is very Pauline. Exaggerate your religious affiliation. Because here's the problem, and then let's move on to the next question. See, the problem is the claim of the church always was that the proof and truth of the Christian religion can be demonstrated, illustrated from the Jewish scriptures that they say prove that Jesus is the Messiah. A plain reading of the Hebrew Bible demonstrates that Jesus is the Messiah. That's the claim of all of Christianity, always was. Well, if that's the case, there should have been some sort of correlation between the more you know about what the Bible has to say about the Messiah, the more likely you should have been to believe in Jesus, if indeed he was. But yet, who are these believers in Jesus? These are kids who know nothing about the faith they've been asked to abandon. Why aren't Jews going to yeshiva, studying Torah, and then flying into churches? The answer is they're the ones who are least likely to convert to Christianity. I'll never forget this. I'll make it the last thing, we'll move on. I'll never forget at a Messianic conference in Dallas, there was a Messianic leader. I'll never forget this as long as I live. So I attended the conference. So how did I get in? Because I was staying at the same hotel. It was a coincidence. I'm kidding. But anyways, so you know what he said to a huge gathering? This is from the UMJC, which is a large union of Messianic Jewish congregations. Huge. I think it may be the largest union of Messianic congregations. And he said, listen to this, you will blow your mind away. He said, if you're going out and witnessing, don't waste your time with Orthodox Jews. They're too hard to evangelize. I forget his words. This goes back a number of years ago. Like, if you see a woman and she's an Orthodox Jew, don't, you're wasting your time with them. And then he said this. He says, now the question is, for an Orthodox Jewish man, you could tell because he's wearing a kippah. And then he said, how could you identify an Orthodox Jewish woman? This is what he said, right? He said, how do you know? Like, don't bother with them. So he said, because he was giving practical advice on evangelism. He said, if you're in Dallas, Texas, and it's 98 degrees, and you see a woman, and she has sleeves below her elbow, and she has a skirt that goes below her knees, that means she's an Orthodox Jew. And therefore, and so here it is from the mouth of the Messianic woman saying that, in fact, that religious Jewish women are modest and they fear Hashem, which is a very interesting statement. He said, don't bother with these people. They're just too hard to witness to. They're just not going to accept you. It's not going to happen, and so on and so forth.